Thank you, Chair Menton, and good evening, Board of Directors and everyone in the room. Tonight is our annual State of the District presentation, and it will be a similar format that we have presented in previous years. It's a pretty lengthy presentation, but we will move through it swiftly. I just sent an email to the full board that has this presentation, and it also has another document attached that I'm going to hit a couple highlights on tonight. So I thought you'd be interested in receiving that, and that's our 2017 Customer Satisfaction Survey. So, Board, you have both of those documents available to you, and then we'll also, and I understand you have a hard copy in front of you, and we'll also be posting at least the State of the District presentation to the website, and we're also recording, video recording the presentation tonight too, so that will be available. Let me just mention, I've had a few questions on the way down the elevator and down the stairs. We do have some activity going on downtown. There's a suspicious device on one of our light rail trains right in the central part of downtown, and that service is interrupted right now, and Denver Police is in response and evaluating that situation, and maybe we'll have an update later in the evening, Mike or Bruce, and if we do, we'll pass that on during the committee evenings. But it is unfortunately putting a little kink in the rush hour commute tonight with train traffic being stopped. Are we bus bridging in between, Bruce?
We are bus bridging, and the mall is also shut down.
Okay. So just wanted to get that out of the way. What I'd like to do tonight is walk through the presentation and then take questions and comments at the end. What I'm hopeful about is that we continue to move through it. Maybe as thoughts and questions are formulating, maybe we'll address those as we move. So the first thing I want to do is just start with introductions, and who we have gathered around the table tonight is all of the senior leadership team and all of the executive office team, and this is the entire team of RTD employees that report directly to me. So we're on the, if you can go to that first slide, Michelle, on the org chart. Thank you. So we've got this is the organizational chart of the direct reports into me, the senior leadership team and the executive office team. The lighter blue, of course, is the senior leadership team, and the dark blue are the executive office team members. And I'll just go around the table and introduce them quickly, beginning over to my left and seated immediately to Director Tisdale's right is Anne Marie Isaac Hillsop, our Manager of Internal Audit. Michelle Breyer is operating our PowerPoint presentation tonight. She's in the Communications Department. Tina Aragon is the Executive Assistant to the General Manager and CEO. Beverly Lindsay is our Employee Liaison and Ombudsman, and you may not have seen Beverly much. She doesn't really get involved much in doing board presentations and things like many others, but she works a lot individually with employees, both salaried and represented, on any issues that they may have, and is a direct conduit to me, the general manager and CEO, on employee-related matters. So what she does is very big and important for us. Immediately next to her is Brian Welch, who is our manager in planning, and he's substituting for Bill Van Meter tonight, who was not feeling well and could not join us. Heather McKillop, our CFO, who I think you all know, and then immediately to my left is Brian Iacono, our Senior Manager of Materials Management. And then immediately to my right is Bruce Abel, our acting COO and Assistant General Manager of Bus Operations. Henry Stoppelkamp, our Assistant General Manager of Capital Programs. Terry Emmons, Assistant General Manager of Rail. Scott Reed, Assistant General Manager of Communications. Ralph Ospug, our General Counsel. And Mike Meter, our Chief Safety Officer and Assistant General Manager of Safety, Security, and Asset Management. We'll begin this evening just talking about a few things that sometimes don't get talked about very much unless you're looking at fact sheets. A lot of times these numbers are just the day-to-day. So I've had some questions about, what's really going on with the day-to-day and how are we doing on a day-to-day basis within the organization. So we've provided some information here in this particular slide to communicate that to the board and our stakeholder. And I'll just point out a few highlights off of this slide. And the first thing I want to point out is that we are on target to provide 3.6 million hours of service this year. And that's a combination of all of our different modes. And you can see that about 2.5 million of those service hours are bus, 250,000 service hours on rail, 636,000 service hours for Access-a-Ride, and about call and ride at 126,000 hours and 50,000 hours of special service, which we also provide quite a bit of. And then just a few other things, just as reminders. We operate 140 local routes, 15 regional routes, 6 BRT routes, 7 rail lines, 2 commuter rail lines, and then you can see some of our other information there about the number of vehicles that we have. And so I think this just kind of helps set a little bit of framework and help understand a little bit of the scope and the breadth of the organization. Last year, we did about 101 million boardings in 2016, and we've reviewed our numbers so far this year. We think we're on pace to do about 100 million boardings in 2017, and on pace to deliver about 99.5% of all of our fixed route bus services and 99.9% of rail services. Just last week, we were provided with some information. We got our final report on our customer satisfaction survey from 2017, and I thought it was really incredibly valuable information to just give a couple highlights to the board this evening, and then depending on how many questions you have maybe towards the end, what we'll probably do is come back at another committee and go through this report in more detail. But we did want to share a few of the highlights. And really this information, so you see some numbers on here. I want to let you know that the numbers and the ratings that you see here, and you see a lot of 4s. These numbers are all over 4s. This is on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being very dissatisfied and 5 being very satisfied and 4 being satisfied. So you can see that we have a very high satisfaction rating amongst our customers that use the services. It really indicates that the things that matter most for the customers are being met and that they're experiencing a high quality of services are the norm for our customers. Now, there are exceptions out there, and we hear about them and you hear about them, but on the day-to-day norm for our customers, they're giving us an overall rating of RTD services of 4.2. So that is a very good rating because it means that our patrons are satisfied and then leading towards very satisfied. The likelihood to choose RTD again rates at 4.7, so that's nearly a 5 rating, which would be almost a completely very satisfied score. And then the likelihood to recommend RTD to others, you can see, is at 4.5. So we take this information from our customers. This is a statistically valid survey. We do this survey every 3 years, and we take this to be very meaningful in terms of the people that are actually using our system, that they are experiencing very good services overall on a day-to-day basis on the RTD system. On the graph towards the second half or the bottom, I put that on there because you can just see the trends from 2011, 2014, and 2017. And you can see that in terms of overall rating on the RTD bus services, we've stayed the same over those 3-year cycles of a 4.2 rating. And we're actually gaining a little bit on the overall rating of RTD train service from 4.1 in 2011 to 4.3 in 2017. Again, very good numbers. Next slide. A few more numbers that I'll highlight from the customer satisfaction survey, and these are interesting indicators that I thought the board would be interested in just how we're doing, on how our customers say we're doing in the areas of, I'll move through this slide from left to right. On the very left-hand side, as you look at the slide, is on-time performance bus, your on-time experience on the bus side, and you can see our patrons are rating that at 4.23. So again, higher than satisfied and approaching very satisfied. On-time performance on the train, 4.49. And then this is a very important one and a very interesting one, especially with some of the activity we have tonight, because we know that people make decisions based on how safe and secure they feel on the system is one of the primary ways they make a decision on whether they're going to take public transit. And our patrons are telling us that they feel safe and secure with a rating of 4.26 on RTD services. The next 2 items are both about information. How well do we do giving route and schedule information to our patrons so that they're able to use the system? And the route information is rated in at 4.28 and schedule at 4.25. And then the very last column is a measure of the value received for the fare paid for their trips. And our patrons are rating that at 4.23. So again, satisfied as far as the experiences they're having. Again, this is just really kind of a snapshot and some highlights of what we have in the survey report. You have that document. We'd be happy to come back and go through that in more detail. Well, those are some things that are going really well. The next thing I wanted to cover is just some really tangible challenges that we're walking through right now today. And you're very familiar with all of these. And it's only reasonable to discuss them as well. Even though you've had a lot of detail on these, I just want to highlight them. And I want to mention too that for every one of these items on here, we have a plan to address them. So the first one, University of Colorado A-line and G-line regulatory approval. I think the board's aware that we just sent an email late last week, Friday. We just had our pre-hearing conference with the administrative law judge at the Public Utilities Commission, so that process is getting set. We're anticipating that we'll have a hearing on the A and the G line crossings. It'll be heard all at once, hopefully in mid-February. We've also petitioned regarding the next item, the completion of the G line testing. In addition to that hearing process getting scheduled, we have filed a motion with the Public Utilities Commission to grant, we've asked them to grant us permission to complete the testing on the G line, and we've asked them to separate that out so that we could hopefully get that approval ahead of the hearing so that we can make up that time. We just filed that last Thursday, I believe, and so we're waiting anxiously to hear back from that. Of course, another challenge is when's the revenue service date for the G line? We will know more as soon as we get into this PUC process and we determine when we're going to be able to get out and get the testing done and when we're going to be able to hear on the results of the hearing. Now, there was a couple of dates that I put in that email, and one was mid-February was the earliest that we could have that hearing. Another one was mid-March, depending on the types of comments that the PUC receives during the comment period. We're pretty confident. We've been working closely with all of the stakeholders that we'll have favorable interventions or favorable comments, and we're pretty hopeful and optimistic that that hearing will occur in mid-February. Now, how long it will take the administrative law judge or the ALJ to reach a decision and issue an order, you know, I don't know. Even if I was to say something tonight, it would be a best guess and a speculation. I would say probably something like maybe 30 days. But again, that's a speculation on my part. Another area, quiet zones. You get lots of questions, particularly if you're one of the directors that is along the University of Colorado A-line where your constituents are calling you and saying, what about these train horns? When are we going to get the quiet zones that RTD said we were going to deliver? That's part of the regulatory process we're working through and continues to be one of our big challenges. Another one of our challenges we're working with on a day-to-day basis is the schedule for the N-line. Many of you know the original contract called for the design build contractor to be done with construction and turn that project over to us in the spring of 2018. You know we've received a notice of claim from that contractor. They're claiming delays for various third-party delays, and so they're saying that schedule cannot be met. We're in dispute resolution with that contractor now. We're getting ready to enter mediation, I believe, Henry. Next week, we're going to be entering into a mediation format with them. And hopefully, you know, work through some things and then be able to get that schedule finalized so that we can then talk to our stakeholders and you about when we're going to be able to open that end line. We have two contractor claims that we're facing. One I just mentioned on the end line. The other one is from Denver Transit Partners. That's our concessionaire on the Eagle Line. These two contractor claims are potentially the biggest claims that RTD has ever received regarding contracts. And the crazy thing about it is we've received them about the same time. So we're keeping the legal department busier than we'd like to, but they're a great team along with our technical team, and we're working through these, but very real challenges for us, taking a lot of time and resources. And then the last major challenge I want to talk about that you're all very familiar with is our operator shortage, both on the bus and on the rail side, and the issue that we're in of mandating overtime. We're at a high level of mandating overtime. It's generated also some dropped runs on the bus side, and so this is one of our primary topics that we're working through right now, trying to reach a resolution and a solution, and it's one of the primary things we're talking to our ATU union leadership about during our CBA negotiations. But what I'd like to do in this next slide is just kind of show you a little bit of the reason of how we're in this situation. So if we go to the next slide, Michelle. So how did we get into this situation where our mandating is so high and that we have such a shortage of bus and rail operators? Well, I can tell you this, it didn't happen overnight, it didn't happen in a year, it didn't happen in 2 years, it didn't happen in 3 years. It's been happening over time. So this graph shows our starting operator wages. So our operators, both bus and rail, they're at the same wage rate. So whether you're a bus operator or a rail operator, they start at the same wages. And through the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement or the contract, they make the same wages throughout their progressions. This graph shows the starting wages from a period in time from 2003 to 2017. And then the last bar at the very end of the green bar that I'll talk about after I discuss the rest of the blue bars is what the Denver average is, the hourly starting wage for people that operate buses in the Denver metropolitan area. So that could be RTD buses, school buses, charter buses, anybody that operates a bus. So we've done that analysis, and that starting average wage in Denver, which is what we would consider the market, is $19.07 an hour, and our current starting wage is $17.59 as of August of 17. But let me talk about some of the things that we have on this graph. Beginning in 2003, I want to point out that we've had several years, there's 10 years total in this time period from 2003 to 2017 where wages were flat per the agreed and executed collective bargaining agreement. And I'll point those years out to you. 2003, 2004, and 2005, wages stayed the same year to year at $13.69. That also, coincidentally, is right after we had a first big recession in 2001, and that was probably one of the reasons why those wages stayed flat during that period of time, because we were in recovery from that 2001 recession that hit everybody pretty hard. In 2009 and 10, we have 2 years of flat wages at $15.49 both years. And then 2011 through 2015, we have essentially 5 years where the wages remain the same. And that some of those years are in the overlap, the current collective bargaining agreement and the one before that. So I'll also point out that the second big recession we had, 2007, 2008-ish, is when we saw that period of about 7 years of flat wages while we were in recovery. So what all this means is that, we've gotten, because of economic conditions, we've gotten behind the market, and it's happened over a long period of time. And it's been through a multiple number of CBAs going back to 2003. The other thing I'll point out on this slide is you see some yellow arrows at the top of these bar charts. And this coincides into major openings of light rail lines. So beginning in 2006, you see the first yellow arrow, and it has SE above it. That's when we opened the Southeast Corridor, or T-Rex. And that more than doubled our light rail system in terms of miles when we opened that. And then you can see a few years later in 2013 is when we opened the W line. And then a few years later in 2017, we opened the R line. Well, what happened over this period of time is up until the R line, when we hire light rail operators, we always hired them from the bus operator ranks. You had to be a bus operator first before you could be a light rail operator. So essentially what we were doing was hiring away our own staff on the bus operator side to fill our light rail operating positions. And because we had such significant expansions in 2006 and then again in 2013, tied together with those recessions and periods of flat wages, we just had a terrible time trying to keep up with backfilling those bus operator positions. Sometime after we opened the W line, but before we opened the R line in 2017, we loosened that rule, and that we now hire people to be light rail operators that don't have to come out of the bus operating ranks. And so, and that's, results are kind of mixed. One of the reasons that we did that is that, this is a very different industry. It's a different lifestyle, the hours that we work and the things that we do. But I wanted to just provide the board with a little bit of information behind, because we've done, believe me, lots of analysis about this situation. Why are we here? How did we get here? But more importantly, how do we come out of this, and how do we get a plan moving ahead? We have a plan. We're working that now, but with our negotiations, like I said, it's probably the single biggest issue we need to work through with our negotiations to be able to bring people to market and then to keep them there. I'll also mention that over time, the average increase that we've seen for all bus operators, so that green column, if you look at that hourly wage, the average increase per year for that group has been about 2.5% per year. So you see that we don't have that incorporated in either. But we have a plan to address this and to move forward. And of course, I won't go into the details, but I think the board's familiar with all of the other things we've done towards recruitment and retention about the $2 an hour for split shifts, $2 an hour for non-bid work, the $1 an hour increase that the board approved in the amended budget in 2017. Now I want to just transition and we'll work through kind of department by department. But I thought that was some valuable information to share with the board to really try to paint a picture for where we are with that particular topic. We'll begin with bus operations. We're just going to work alphabetically, and I'm just going to hit the highlights. The rest of this presentation is broken into roughly 3 major accomplishments, 3 major goals, and 3 major challenges for each department. And I won't go through each one. Each one also begins with the organizational chart of each department, and I think the board is generally pretty familiar with our teams. Of course, bus operations is headed up by Bruce Abel and his team. Some of the accomplishments here, I think one of the significant things that we did was the rebid of the ADA paratransit services. And because we did that rebid, our contractors were able to adjust their rates and subsequently their wages, and now they've been able to hire much more successfully, and our on-time performance has increased. The issue we've had with we've had a reduction in having to do manual manifests because we've had more operators on that side. So we consider this to be a very good accomplishment and very successful. A couple other things that I will mention in terms of accomplishments. Also on Accessoride, we completed the implementation of interactive voice response system that we've been working on for some time. We implemented the mall shuttle fleet. It's a zero emission electric fleet, and you all see those out every day, and we did some reconfiguration of some fixed route buses to help with customers using mobility devices. Regarding the goals, these I think won't have any surprises here. Our number one goal for bus operations is to reduce the amount of mandating or forced operating of bus operators. Another major goal is to implement the restructured bus service when we open the G-Line commuter rail service, and then to reduce lost hours of service due to operator non-availability. As far as challenges, of course, meeting the staffing needs in all areas that we need to successfully deliver our services. And then I would just mention how we're going to address technology and the meeting demand for different kinds of mobility options, and the board's familiar that we put out a request for information for these types of things, and we're getting a lot of good questions and responses for that in terms of mobility on demand, transportation as a service, and mobility as a service. Move into capital programs next. This is Henry Stoppelkamp and his team. Some good accomplishments in this area, as always. We opened the R-Line into revenue service in February 2017. We're going to open Civic Center renovation this Friday. We will have the opening celebration where we'll have an opening house and a ribbon cutting. Today we did a media tour. It was well attended by, I think we had almost every major media outlet there. And it was nice to walk through the facility and see the major elements of it, including some repurposed materials that are out there. We used some of the pavers that were in the sidewalk, some of the granite pavers. We used those to tile one of the walls where the buses actually exit the facility. And when you see it from the street, it looks like tiles, but as you get close, you can see that it's actually the granite that was repurposed. So we're kind of keeping hold of some of that history of that site. But the site's wonderful, and I'm really eager to get our patrons back indoors and into Civic Center Station over the weekend. And I stopped in and visited with the sales team and the Lost and Found team, and they're incredibly excited to get out of the trailer and into their permanent offices. So this is going to be great. Good job of getting this done on time and on budget, Henry, to you and your team. Also, solutions on the 16th Street Mall, Henry, and of course the planning group. Their teams have been working diligently with City and County of Denver and downtown stakeholders to work on solutions for the mall. It'll continue to be a challenge, but I think we've made some huge accomplishments with keeping the shuttles on the mall, being able to communicate exactly how important that is to our transportation plan in the region and how we operate our services between Civic Center and Union Station. Goals. Number one goal is to place the G-Line in service and institute the quiet zones on the US Colorado A-Line and the G-Line. Continue to work the 16th Street Mall and continue to work state of good repair projects. Challenges. I'd say one of the main things I would point out here is it's always challenging to keep our projects on track, on budget, and within schedule, and also trying to meet all of our changing stakeholder needs and expectations, and keeping these projects within scope. So I'd say that's always an ongoing major challenge within the capital programs area. On to communications department, and as you all know, this is headed up by Scott Reed and his team, and you can see the organizational chart there. We're looking at this particular department now and seeing if there are some structural changes that we may be opportunistic for us. So as we work through those, we'll be keeping you informed. Working through some of the accomplishments. New trip planner that was launched this year, and the good thing about this trip planner is not only is it new and latest technology, but now it's also in sync with the trip planner that our customer service or our customer care agents actually have. So they can speak the same language, see the same thing that our customers are seeing as they try to help them and troubleshoot them. We received, again, a number of national awards, and this is, we're really no stranger to this. I mean, almost every year we receive first place AdWheel awards, as many years back as I can remember, but this year we won the grand prize of all the awards for the campaign about the University of Colorado A-Line on the train to the plane, plus 6 other first place AdWheel awards. And then we're increasing our social media presence and work as well. As you can see, we're getting higher numbers there in terms of impressions and responses. Upcoming goals, greater utilization of the mobile lab, which we're just beginning to roll out this year, both to use with internal and external audiences to generate consensus around key topics. It gives, this tool really is a great way for people to get their voices heard and to use both in a public setting and also in others. Continuing to communicate the RTD message. It's always challenging, and I think that this is an area where I often receive comments about doing better about the messaging and telling a more positive RTD story, and that's always challenging because we're not always in direct control of that story, but we will continue to work as best as we can to tell the RTD story. And some of those things, like I started the presentation with tonight, is that numbers that you never see. You never see the annual number of hours that we put on the street. All people really talk about is the exception. So we'll continue to just work on, the things that RTD is doing, and that'll include our challenges as well. We'll be completely transparent there. And then, of course, to continue to represent us, this group, the communications group, also houses our government affairs. So continuing to work with our local, state, and federal partners in that area. Challenges in the communications area, of course, as we move forward with the G line and then also the N line, getting that messaging and time frame out and getting that out timely. In this time that we're in, information is instantaneous. It's very hard to have a notice to the board and then a notice to stakeholders and then a notice to media. I mean, once it's out, it's out. So these areas are challenging, but we continue to work on that and hopefully, get the message in the hands of the people that need it when they want to have it, and not have them hear it from somebody else. The other big thing I'll mention here is working on the Fast Tracks website. So the Fast Tracks website was a completely separate website. We're working on merging that into the main RTD website. There's an awful lot of information here and awful lot of updating that we need to do. And so that's a fairly big challenge, but we're working through that. The next group we'll highlight is our finance and administration. And here you see the organizational chart. And of course, this is headed up by Heather McKillop and her team. Lots of great accomplishments in finance and administration. We'll start rolling through those, beginning with the MyRide portal that launched in May. And we're getting very favorable comments about the stored value MyRide card and the use of the portal. So that is out and active. Real-time predictions for light rail went live in August. And then kind of one of my personal favorites is mobile ticketing, because this was not part of our goals. This was something that I went to Heather and her team with and said, how quickly can we stand up mobile ticketing? Because this is one of the single largest questions I get about fare. When can I buy fare on my smartphone? And I think with the implementation of mobile ticketing now, I think we have every way that you can buy fare or a ticket covered, from paper to smart cards to stored value cards to coupons. And now you can use your smartphone. And this project went live 2 months ahead of schedule. It was stood up very quickly. It was a very low implementation cost, and we're very eager to see how well it's received. And then the last accomplishment I really want to highlight is these refinancings or refundings that were done by Heather and her team, and there were 6 of them done in 2017. This is a huge milestone, saving $192 million between 2018 and 2040. So great work to be able to take advantage of this market, to be able to do this. And of course, I think you all know after the federal update that we had last week that this kind of activity, this opportunity may go away soon, or it may stay, but we're way ahead of the curve on this. So great work and a great thing to highlight. Goals in this particular area, of course, ratification of the collective bargaining agreement, improving recruitment and retention of bus and light rail operators. You'll see that through on a few different departments and a few different themes. Implementation of the past program working group recommendations and preparing for any fare changes, if we have any fare changes in January 1 of 2019, as the board knows and we talked about last week with the past program working group update, the board will consider every 3 years, and 2018 is our third year, so we'll consider looking at the fare in 2018, right in time to consider any of the recommendations from the past program working group. And then I'll mention our debt service coverage. We need to get back. We're a little bit below that now, and we need to get back to that. One of the things that I'll mention while we're still on the finance and administration challenges, and then yes, the challenges is that once in a while I get questions from my colleagues or friends and say, I read a lot about RTD. How's the organization doing? And I say, well, we're just like any other organization. We have a budget, we have needs, we have wants, we have requests, but we have to manage what we do. Can we do everything we'd like to do? Can we do everything we're asked? No, but we're managing according to our budget, and we're doing that well, and we're doing it very fiscally responsible. Next group I want to highlight is the General Counsel organization or department, and of course that's Rolf Ospog and his team. And one thing that I'll mention here, because I think sometimes, and I really went through quickly on these org charts, and I didn't mention all the different divisions and all the different departments, but there's more than just legal in the legal department. So there's our risk management and insurance group, and then there's also our information governance group. So these are two separate and distinct divisions that are outside of RTD law that Rolf and his team are taking care of. Moving into some of the accomplishments here, as I said earlier, we've been keeping this team too busy, and maybe our goal for next year should be not to keep them that busy. So they've had a lot of challenges and commitments. The 2 construction claims that I've already mentioned earlier, extensive PUC filings in terms of all of our corridor projects, and I mean even if we weren't in the regulatory hurdles with the A line and the G line, still with the volume of all the grade crossings and all the work that we're doing is beyond considerable. And then of course their work in assisting the finance team and supporting them with the refinancings. They've done some work on improving our Cora systems, and then also some groundbreaking work in diversity and mentoring initiatives by joining being part of the Colorado Attorney Mentoring Program. And so really setting the stage and leading the industry for that. Some general counsel goals, very similarly to some of the accomplishments already, being able to effectively manage the regulatory and contractual matters that we're facing along Eagle and North Metro, anything that might be lingering on the collective bargaining side, and then also providing all their other legal services to supporting all the other RTD divisions and departments, including procurement and human resources and all the other activities that they do. Another activity of goals is we're migrating all of the management directives to a more comprehensive and easily searchable program, and that's being really headlined by our information governance. And we'll move to challenges on the next slide. Again, similar to the goals, working through the data-intensive Eagle and North Metro regulatory environment, working through the PUC matters, and at the same time just taking care of the day-to-day. Continuing to work towards an integrated information governance policy. And then one thing I'll mention is that we are seeing increasing numbers of liability claims, and they're also subject to a higher dollar limit now. That dollar limit has gone up in recent years, so we have a little bit more exposure in terms of the dollar amount. of all the claims. So, this is an area of focus, and that together with the legal group and the risk management group and the safety group, they're looking at this area closely. Let's move on to the planning organization. Bill Van Meter and his team, and again, Brian Welch is here tonight representing them. Within the planning group, the accomplishments we'll move right to. Right off the top, we'll talk about the convening the past program working group and significant progress in this evaluation process. I think we've had 8 meetings, moving into our 9th meeting next week, I believe on the 19th, so that group is moving along. Awarded the contract for State Highway 119 BRT, and then also the contract for our district-wide regional BRT feasibility study. Some goals in the planning area to get the agency approvals for the improvements on the 15L project. Develop a list of our highest priority corridors for BRT as part of the feasibility study on a district-wide. And then, of course, our continuous improvement and innovation division is in this group, and continuing to work on this area and support the core processes and make improvements throughout the rest of the organization. Moving on to challenges. Some of the area that we're going to focus on in the internal improvements at employee recruitment and retention, especially operators and mechanics. Again, similar to working hand in hand with the capital group, managing stakeholder expectations for outcomes related to 16th Street Mall. We have the first and last mile study, the past program working group, and then of course there's other projects going on that are being done by others, and we have the group right now kind of putting together some more information sheets on those so that we can track those and report those to the board on what are the different activities going on, what are the potential for impacts to the RTD, either high, medium, or low. So we'll do some work on categorizing those for you. And then, of course, this is the primary group that will be overseeing the work on the contract side for mobility choice, and that contract is just now being selected and being signed. Rail operations, and this group is headed up by Terry Emmons, and this includes light rail and, of course, commuter rail. A couple major accomplishments in this group this year. One was some state of good repair projects, completely rebuilt some of the aging infrastructure at the northbound Spear grade crossing. You'll notice now that when you go across there, it's smooth. You don't depending how fast you go, you don't just hit a bump or bottom out or spark. Now it's nice and smooth. My brother-in-law tells people that he said that he had that fixed because he knew somebody, but that's not the case. We needed to fix, because he goes through there every day too. But that's one of his favorite jokes. But we had to fix that because it was obviously deteriorating underneath the track bed. And our original rail system's 23, 24 years old now, Terry, and so we're having to work on that. And of course, the spectacular work of the rail operations group and doing the integrated testing and training to get the R line open in February. And then some safety enhancements in terms of the implementation of the roadway worker protection system. And this is something we've been working on a number of years. It's really going to enhance safety for the people that work out on our right-of-way system. Some goals for rail operations, again, in this area of staffing. Assuring that we're doing everything we can to appropriately staff the light rail division with operators, and especially as we're looking at the opening of the Southeast Rail Extension coming up in the near future, and then also a minor modification with the L line. We're going to be hosting the APTA International Rail Rodeo next year, along with the APTA Rail Conference in June of 2018. And actually, was that the planning committee that was here today, Terry? The rodeo planning committee, and I was surprised to see. I thought it was going to be a room full of about 20 people, and there must have been, I don't know, 80 people or so, and representing agencies across the entire country, and even from Japan, who will have a team here competing at the rail rodeo. And he came up and introduced himself to me and said they were very much looking forward to being in Denver and competing here in Denver. So it's going to be, it truly is going to be an international rail rodeo. But it's a lot of work goes into planning this rodeo and then pulling it off, and of course hosting the conference as well. We're going to be receiving 29 new light rail vehicles, so that'll be some of the goals will be getting those commissioned successfully. And then the last thing I really want to highlight on these goals is we're beginning the mobilization of the N-line operations team and the requirements for RTD operations of the N-line. Moving on to challenges. Continue to maintain the light rail vehicles in a state of good repair, and then also just the entire light rail system. And then, of course, we have the light rail vehicle overhaul to meet the ADA agreement that we settled to, so that will be ongoing over the next few years. But we have to pull those trains out of service, and it's a pretty extensive period of time in which it takes for us to get that work done. Recruiting and retraining our operators that we need to run the system, and then continue to obtain the funding for the state of good repair projects. Safety, security, and asset management, headed up by Mike Meter and his team. A lot of activity in this area. Working closely with the Public Utilities Commission, we had to develop a whole new set of what's called State Safety Oversight Program standards, because this is a whole new set of regulations from the Federal Transit Administration. The Public Utilities Commission is our state safety oversight for light rail. So this is in addition to their authority that they have over grade crossings. It's a completely separate program of just the grade crossings, and it's through the Federal Transit Administration. And Mike and his team have done a great job working with the PUC to develop their new program standards, and also to develop our programs internally that we need to comply with the new regulations. We've made a lot of security improvements around the district, some of those you've seen in this building. We completed our gap assessment for pursuing ISO International Standards certification on our asset management program, which is going to gain us not just improvements in asset management, but process improvements throughout the entire district and how we do business. And then another important area is developing a more robust safety reporting system for employees. Goals as we move into next year: implementing safety management system policy and hazard risk management systems. This is one of the pillars of the new FTA regulation, so it's going to be a big focal point for us. Accomplish all of our milestones under asset management, the system roadmap to achieve certification. And then always one of our big goals and one of our big challenges is safety and security on the system. And that's, what is the balance, where is the line, how much security is enough? And so providing law enforcement and security services throughout our entire system and facilities. So moving on to challenges, capturing data across the entire organization so we can make improvements, and then working with developing greater systems to even improve our safety reporting and feedback loops for our employees. I'm going to move now into what we call the executive office structure, and of course this is our civil rights group headed up by Zami Silva, and Zami is not here tonight. She had a daughter in a production or something like that tonight, and so she has dispensation to be taking care of a higher priority than being here, so I thought it was appropriate for her to be with her daughter, and I hope the rest of you aren't missing anything. That goes for all of you, but it is that time of year. So Zami, and then materials management with Brian Iacono, and then our internal audit by Anne Marie. But we'll begin with civil rights, a variety of accomplishments here. The thing I really want to highlight is the FTA triennial review this year was just incredible in terms of this area in EEO and ADA. Not only were there no findings, but a lot of the practices and the procedures were recognized as industry best standards and leaders in the transportation industry. We launched the first Colorado Small Business Collaboration Conference jointly with RTD, CDOT, and CCD. We had the Breakfast of Champions to just recognize our contractors on Fast Tracks program for the $1 billion of the $5.6 billion Fast Tracks program that was paid to DBE and SBEs, and then other community partnerships, including the Advisory Committee for People with Disabilities. Our goals, a few things here as far as working on additional training for employees to enhance basic awareness and understanding policies and procedures relating to EEO and ADA. Also, in terms of diversity, rolling out some additional training in a diversity class. Regarding challenges, I'll highlight that the top bullet there. We do have processes on ADA complaints, but this continues to be a challenging area for us to continue to work on improvements on this process, so it's going to be a real area of focus for us. And then I will just mention that the WIN program, this program has been very successful for us since its initiation, but as we don't have as many construction projects now, we're going to be transitioning this program to working more on how do we use the WIN program to more directly benefit the hiring that we need to do within the organization, focusing on operations and maintenance. So we'll be transitioning that program a bit. Internal audit headed up by Anne Marie. And of course, accomplishments is they're on track to complete the 2017 annual audit plan. You're going to be getting a briefing from her a little bit later this evening in the committee. Several of their audits, more and more, I think we've been identifying audits that are more important to the district in terms of looking at risk and being able to add more value in terms of the audit area than we have in years past. They've been able to add some skill sets through additional training for Anne Marie and her team as well. So goals, moving to goals for 2018, of course, to complete the annual audit plan that you will see tonight for 2018, the proposed plan. Working with senior leadership to continue to acquire responses to audits in a timely manner, and then plan audits to achieve a wider coverage of RTD systems, policies, and procedures. One of the challenges in audit is that there's always more work to do than resources that we have available, and so completing the audit plan with the resources that we have there, although we have made some changes within the 2018 budget to assist this division, and that comes in the form of some contract funding that will be available in the 2018 budget, where Anne Marie and her team will be able to contract out some of the audit work, and then also the adding of a couple of interns. Next item is materials management, and Brian Iacono in his area. And although Brian didn't mention it here, he's a humble guy. I don't see it in his accomplishments, but this was also another area in the triennial review that was not only were there no findings, but it was recognized as an industry best practice. They wanted RTD's procurement manual so they could share it with other agencies around the country because they were impressed with the work, and that's just a real tribute to Brian and his team. He's a real expert in the procurement area, and we're glad to have him on board. But some of the other things in there, you can see some of these numbers about all the purchase orders and the dollar amount, $160 million worth of purchase orders and contracts in 2017. We've gained some revenue from auction of our surplus and obsolete property. And then, of course, one of the areas that Brian oversees as well is the inventory in the central warehouses and maintaining all the parts that all our maintainers need to keep our buses and trains rolling and achieving that stock out level and meeting the performance goal. And his team does a great job with that. Goals, of course, will be continue to do a great job with the contracts to support the base system and fast tracks. Maintain the stock out level, and then they're looking at successful implementation of a new inventory forecasting software so we can get even better at the inventory piece. And this is really around, I believe, trying to do a little bit more of just-in-time kind of inventory, Brian, and seeing if we can't even lower inventory a little bit, but still manage that stock out level and keep the system running. Challenges in this area, maintaining the stock out, maintaining the inventory. And then the other thing is monitoring diesel fuel prices. And this year we had a little bit, Mother Nature wreaked some havoc this year. And so right about the time that we would normally do a fuel lock, we had a couple of hurricanes in the Gulf that raised fuel prices considerably. So when we would normally have done our fuel lock, we didn't. So we're still monitoring that process for the 2018 budget year and determining when we'll reach that, and Brian's group does the lion's share of that monitoring and reporting for us. All right, that concludes moving through on a department basis, and I have just a few more slides board to get through. I thought now would be a good time to transition as we've talked about kind of the big picture of the great things that have been happening around the district, the incredible challenges that we have as well, and then what's happening department by department, to talk about the 2018 agency strategic goals, and here they are. The board adopted strategic goals for 2018, and these were adopted about mid-year this year. Fiscal sustainability, workforce and human capital, asset management, and state of good repair. And these are the three main strategic goals that drive, of course, the 2018 board adopted budget and the board adopted SBP and the board adopted APE. And so in addition to these three task goals, we have the 5 core goals that the general manager receives each year around delivering service, fiscal sustainability, managing finances, and communications with the board and those kinds of things. So just a reminder to set the stage for where we're headed for 2018. So I talked about some additional just challenges and priorities. So early in the presentation, I talked about some very tangible challenges that we're wrestling with every day. But I also just wanted to just kind of draw some generalizations at this time too. Fiscal sustainability is always up there. It's the main thing that drives our organization. We have to be fiscally sustainable, and we have to do what we can do, and especially in terms of looking at the mid and long range in terms of state of good repair, because we cannot afford to get into backlog. Right now, we do not have assets in this agency that are in backlog that are not scheduled to be replaced. That is incredibly unique in the industry. The transit industry across the U.S. is facing a $90 billion backlog in transit assets. And I think one of our legacies needs to be that we will not get into backlog. Workforce, you've heard a lot about workforce, wages, collective bargaining agreement, and the trusts. I mentioned state of good repair. We have aging bus facilities. We're looking at what we're going to do with those facilities and perhaps the need for a new one. That'll be part of the BRT study, I believe, and we talked about that last week. New regulations are always challenging. Identifying the funding to complete fast tracks. It's every year we continue to focus on this. We continue to maintain that we have 4 projects left, the remainder of the B line, the remainder of the Central Rail extension, the remainder of the Southwest Rail extension, and the 6 remaining miles of the North Metro line. All those projects total about $2 billion. We still actively are pursuing whatever we can to try to identify funding, or looking at, like we're doing with the B line, looking at the operation plan with the stakeholders to see if there are alternatives to maybe get the costs down. Of course, our G line opening is a challenge. And that last bullet I've already covered. So where are we kind of heading? What's going on? I talk a little bit about vision and convergence of a lot of different things that are going on. We have a lot of initiatives that are happening within this organization that really aren't front and center, that that don't get talked about a lot. And so I'm going to mention some of those tonight. And those are beginning with the safety culture. Under Mike's leadership, we are really working in this area to make very strategic improvements in our safety culture, and that is, of course, an effort that not only involves the safety department, but the entire organization as a team. We're making great headway there as we transition into the new regulatory environment with safety management systems. It's going to even build our safety culture even to a more robust place. Our asset management and state of good repair program, of course, that the board knows quite a bit about, and this, along with fiscal sustainability, really are the 2 key things that need to drive this agency. These are the focus areas for this agency to be successful in the mid and long term. And then, of course, our continuous improvement efforts that are going on in our division under planning, where we look at processes across the entire organization. These 3 initiatives really are converging in a way that's really going to change the face and the way we do business, driving our decisions with data-driven decisions, developing enterprise-based risk management. Some of these things were identified as gaps in our gap assessment. One thing that we haven't really talked about with the board yet is a comprehensive operational analysis. The senior leadership team, we're going to be convening one of our regularly scheduled meetings is going to be dedicated towards looking at comprehensive operational analysis and what that means. So what do I mean by a comprehensive operational analysis? You might be familiar, as you've heard around some other agencies, as you have attended different conferences and things, that some agencies have done a complete, fresh, new look at how they're delivering, particularly their bus services. Many of them do the service changes like we do several times a year, where you can do smaller adjustments and things. But a handful of organizations have said, what if we could just start from scratch, a green screen, and just pick up, the whole service plan and just say, okay, now if we could just take all of our revenue hours and draw the most efficient, most robust, most effective system we can, what would that look like? We're going to start examining what that looks like for RTD. So that's an effort that we're going to be looking at, the SLT, and then our team of service planners and others early in the year. And that, of course, is, you can see I have this arrow to something we call the system optimization plan. And that's really a terminology for the long term of where everything can converge to how are we going to be able to do everything we're doing now, maximize all of the investment we've made over the years, including the $5.6 billion investment in fast tracks. How are we going to incorporate technology, mobility on demand, transportation as a service, mobility as a service, and work towards just optimizing what we do as a service. So these are things that in addition to a lot of the other things you hear us talk about, and in addition to the goals that are stated, that are front and center with the team, and that we will be keep coming back and reporting to the board on. And then this is my last slide, and it's good because I think I'm running out of voice. I apologize for that. It's general state of the district. I just want to start by just saying we have a great team of RTD employees. It's just incredible, the team we have. Yeah, I think, could we? I mean, throughout the entire organization, from everywhere, from all the divisions, all of our operators, all of our maintainers, and through all the people that work here at Blake and at Fast Tracks. We have a great team. They work hard every day to do the right thing, and they want to do it and do it well. Safety, service, and reliability are our core values. The agency continues to perform at a high level. We're over 80% of our performance measures. We're operating within budget, on time. We're meeting most of our goals, receiving national recognition and awards as a transit agency that's doing a good job. We're financially stable by managing our competing priorities. We're striving to be a transparent, collaborative partner. We're focused on continuous improvement and innovation, and we're positioned well to continue to meet our goals and deliver service. So we stayed at just a couple minutes under an hour, and happy to take questions or comments. Thank you for allowing us to get through the entire presentation.